This podcast is brought to you by Primary Intelligence, the leader in win-loss analysis, focused on helping businesses uncover the unique story on how each sales rep can win more deals.
Hey everyone, and thanks for joining me on another rousing edition of Sales Intelligence Weekly, brought to you by Primary Intelligence. I'm Ryan Queller. Product marketing. So product marketing has become an essential function for B2B businesses that actually want to win more. If you want to create better go-to-market strategies and increase your sales win rate, having a product marketer on the team is key. But the definitions around product marketing can still be somewhat fluid depending on your organization. In 2020, the Product Marketing Alliance collected over 160 definitions for what a product marketer does. This role is evolving. It's changing, like pretty much any other role in any organization. So today, we're going to dive into this idea of what product marketing is. We're going to explore the state of product marketing, past, present, future. Here to share his insights is Sean Broderick, Director of Go-to-Market and Product Marketing at Sitecore. Sean, welcome to the show, man.
Absolutely delighted to be here, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Okay, so before we get into this, we have a habit, if you will, at Sales Intelligence Weekly to have you, we need to peel your onion a little bit, right? So who are you? Tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about Sitecore.
Yeah, for myself, a career product marketer, basically. I've spent about 12 to 14 years in the space, came out of B2C marketing and telcos. And since then, I've kind of been in the telecom, Salesforce, Sitecore CMS product marketing space. From our point of view, Sitecore, we're a DXP platform provider. We're undergoing a transition of our own in that we're moving to the cloud. We're moving to a composable DXP type solution and moving away from that monolith. We still have those solutions there for everybody who needs it, but we're seeing a massive drive from our customers to want to be able to look at the pieces that they need to look at to really solve their own customer problems. So it's a really exciting time for us at Sitecore. We've had a mass amount of product innovation, but also new companies that we've acquired that we're really kind of merging into our solution also. So I'm there almost a year now. It's kind of hard to believe, but starting to bed in and really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's funny how time flies, man. You snap your fingers, 12 months are gone, and what happened? What did I do? Where am I? All right, so excited to get into this conversation today. I want to start with some definitions. What is product marketing, right? So at the beginning, in the pre-show, you and I were talking, getting to know each other a little bit, and you said, people overcomplicate product marketing. So help us demystify, help us unpack that. What is a product marketer?
My favorite definition of what we're responsible for is getting products to market and keeping them there. And I think the commercial launch of new and existing products is the bedrock of where the role, I think, came from. How do we get this stuff to market? Everything else hangs from that. So once you get into your positioning, your messaging, and all the other elements that help you launch your product to the market, all of that should and is tied up in that. So that's how I really see it. I think that's a product marketing alliance definition, getting products to market and keeping them there. It's probably as succinct and as close to how I feel about the role as I've come across, and it's always the one that I use when I'm asked that question.
I love that. That's a very succinct and easy to understand response. But let's now make a necessary complication. I mean, just, hey, let's demystify. Now let's get complicated. So what should today's product marketer own, right? So you said at a very top level, getting the product to market and keeping it there. Perfect definition. Let's take it a few layers deeper. What do they own?
Yeah, I think that this is always a tricky one, and it's going to be on a company by company basis. But the way I would always see a product marketer is they need to own the commercial aspect of that launch. What I find is if you embed yourself too far into the engineering and the product development process, you're going to get bogged down in all of the features, all of the Jira tickets, all of those things that go into getting a product into a release cycle. Where I try and position myself is a little bit further down that track. So when you're working with the product management team, when things are coming a couple of months away from release, if that's for an existing or a new product, and then you can start to work with the sales teams, the customer success teams, and get those people in that organization ready for that commercial launch. How is this thing going to help us make money? And I think that's the kind of last piece that the product marketers really need to hone in on. And I think we can talk about sales enablement and we can talk about these other things in terms of internal enablement, but it's really all about the bottom line. How is this going to help? How's this new product going to help our win rates? How much is it going to drive in terms of revenue in the business this year? And how do all the activities that product marketers actually complete on a day-to-day basis going to help us get there? For me, that's not really down in the weeds on all of the Jira boards. What I want to know is, what is it and when is it launching, and when is it going to be release ready? Because I think there's a really strong distinction there. If something is going to be ready on March 1st, we might make a business decision that we're going to launch it on April 1st. And then we're going to take that time to really create the material to generate a little bit of a buzz internally, generate that buzz externally as well. For us at Sitecore, it's a challenge. We've got 11 products. We've got 3 clouds. We've got a DXP. We've got a managed cloud. So really generating that buzz across all of those products is pretty impossible. So you have to pick your spots. And I think that's so important that product marketers can really, rather than trying to do absolutely everything, really focus in on the areas that are going to drive the most value for the business. And that's making sure that you're aligned with your sales team, you're aligned with the revenue goals, and you're aligned with how a business is focused on making money in that quarter or in that financial year.
So how do you do that though? So I love this, right? So you stop just shy of getting into the product dev stuff, not just shy, maybe even steps removed from product dev. Because you don't want to get bogged down in the weeds of the tickets, the creation, right? You want to talk about the commercial side of things. How do you do that? How do you find your sweet spot of where you should focus? If every organization is different, I mean, in any given organization, give some tips and tricks to our listeners on how to find their sweet spot as a product marketer.
I think it's all about building those relationships, because I think we were talking about, the things that I'm involved in, both from a work context and things outside like podcasts and board membership and things like that. The natural, I suppose, inclinations of a product marketer is to take on absolutely everything. We try and eat the whole meal all of the time, and it's just not possible. And I think that prioritization is really crucial. And in order to really be effective, the relationships you need to build with your engineering team, your product team, and I think particularly in your external marketing team, both from a campaign and a website point of view, are super important, because you can't do it all. And I think having that visibility we have an engineering project management office who work with our product management team, and they'll have a really good sense of the progress that they're making on releases. We sit in on those update calls once a week. So we get a really good sense of what's delayed, what's coming, what's deprioritized, but we keep it at that level. And that's how I would maybe make that distinction for people who are listening in now. If you're kind of finding that you're in all of the sprints, you're in all of those initial ceremonies that go with agile product software development right now, that's the area that you need to get yourself to. And I think that's how I would characterize it for everyone in the product marketing space.
So that's super helpful. You actually are spurring on a very curious mind here. Because we don't have a fixed definition like most roles have, or it varies greatly, maybe maybe there's a wider variation from organization to organization than almost any other role or job function. You mentioned one thing about what might make a good product marketer, and it's that drive and curiosity to get into everything, but then knowing how to pull yourself and focus on your organization. What are some other things, some other attributes or characteristics of a person that might be wanting to get into product marketing? What makes a good product marketer?
It's a really big question, right? But
Right.
I would say that product marketers as a whole, when we talk about the role, there's a danger that we kind of mystify it almost too much,
Mm.
and that there is a kind of a people like to kind of frame a layer of impossibility to this role. Unfortunately, for anyone, I think when if a product marketer doesn't show up for work, it's not a case that, we're not going to cure cancer. We're not going to actually kind of nobody's working on it at those things at that level. This job is possible to learn and it's possible to do. I think anybody who has a really good sense of writing, a commercial focus, the ability to work with multiple stakeholders, the ability to work in, I guess, a really kind of structured way from a project perspective. You'll have campaign managers, demand managers, general marketing managers in the B2C space. All of those profiles of people are really suited to the role. I know a couple of people who have come in from the BDR side of the house and even from the AE side of the house into the product marketing function. If they bring a real structure to their work, if they can write good copy, and they're obviously going to have that empathy for a seller, they can absolutely come in and do that role as well. So I think all of those profiles and backgrounds, the kind of three things I would say is ability to write good copy, be able to hone in on messaging that's really clear, the ability to work with multiple stakeholders, and like I say, that kind of sales and commercial focus. If you have all of those things, you can absolutely come into a role. And I think one of the things I'm hoping to do in the future at Sitecore in my own career is put more of a focus on folks who haven't actually got into the role yet. So people who want to break into product marketing is really important, because there's in a role that people aren't fully sure of what they want from that person, they're going to gravitate towards the most senior person they can get. And I think that's something we need to change. And as product marketing leaders in the space, we need now to be able to get our hands on that budget and drive the next generation of product marketers that are going to come into the role with 1 and 2 years experience, with people that are going to come into the role straight out of college. The biggest, smartest companies are doing that right now. And I think it's going to take, for more medium size and smaller orgs, it's going to take them a little bit longer. But I think if you have somebody in there who understands the space, who's done some of the certifications that are out there that are all really, really strong and giving you a good foundation, that's really going to give you a really good basis for growth. And in 2 or 3 years' time, you're going to have an army of those product marketing managers with 3 and 4 years experience, because product marketers aren't created. So you really have to give people the opportunity to get in, learn the role, and make an impact and grow their own careers as well.
Product marketers aren't created; they're developed, right? They're over time. So okay, so we've talked about you've leaned into really the future, where things are headed here with product marketing. Let's talk about the past a little bit, right? So how are things different today than they were, say, 5 or even 10 years ago for product marketers?
When I first came into a product marketing role, I'd come out of about 4 years in B2C marketing roles in telcos. So it was very much around the proposition and new introductions for products, bundling for things like broadband, TV, voice, mobile phones, that kind of quad play type space. So when I came into the product marketing space in a company called OpenET, they're a telecom software company. They're now owned by Amdocs. And a lot of people will be familiar with Amdocs in the telecoms billing and charging space. The area that we really honed in on was the sales enablement side. So big enterprise deals, long sales cycle, anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So the first 6 or 7 years of my product marketing career were very much around, I would say strategic deal support. Because when you have a long sales cycle, you could have a ticket value of a deal size that is up around €1 million. The sales team, it's a full revenue team effort to get those deals over the line, from the product management side, product marketing, the sellers, obviously, and particularly the SEs. So working with those teams, building the demo stories, building the presentations, and even getting in front of those customers. Because when you have an in-depth knowledge of a telco customer, as I did at that time, you're able to kind of deliver that message in that way. So my real first experience and how it was 10 years ago for me was very much closely closely working with the sales team pretty much at all levels of their sales cycle, creating those assets, creating those bespoke presentations for those larger deals. So that's how it's kind of evolved for me. I think back 10 years ago, probably wasn't building too many messaging frameworks. We were just kind of building presentations that we thought looked good and were well received by customers. And I think, we also delved in and supported quite a lot on the demand generation side, content generation. So we kind of cut our teeth in writing long form guides on customer use cases, really kind of throwing stuff at the wall in a lot of ways from a content point of view and to see what stuck. Some of it did, some of it didn't, but we learned a ton.
Okay, so we've talked about the evolution, where we think we're headed. What are some of the KPIs that product marketers might be attached to inside of organizations? What kind of KPIs should they be looking to, metrics should they be looking to impact?
I think it has to start at the new product introduction level. So when you're introducing brand new products, if there's a revenue line that you're trying to hit 10 million in revenue for a new product in that year, that has to be your top line KPI. It's not to say that everything a product marketer does can affect that number. And with sales cycles, these things can take a little bit of time, but the revenue number has to sit at the top of your goals, because all of the other things that feed into that, assets that you create from a competitive intelligence point of view, presentations you create for pitch decks, data sheets, content that sellers need, internal enablement sessions and training, all of that is feeding towards helping the commercial teams in the organization hit their number. I have a lot of empathy for salespeople. I know it's a really, really tough job banging on virtual and physical doors. And I think it's, that's one of the areas that I'm really passionate about, is giving them the tools that are going to allow them to close deals faster. So revenue line has got to be up there. I think if you have the ability to have sales enablement type solutions and tooling in your organization, things like HighSpot, for example, you're able to really track how people are consuming your content. So you can start to piece in, I would say, elements like, viewership, the amount of times your content has been downloaded, how much it's actually being used. A lot of people aren't necessarily as mature as that, but I think those are things you can hone in on as well. Other elements I think that are maybe a little bit harder to track in organizations are win rates, because I think depending on the deal cycle and the deal length, they can go from quarter to quarter, year to year. Like I say, my first experience in product marketing was with a sales company with a sales cycle from anywhere from 6 to 18 months in certain cases. So it's difficult in a calendar year to kind of hone in on those. But I think that's why I always bring it back to that revenue number. And I think one of the things I always like to do for my team as well is just making sure that they are honing in on their own learning and development as well. So whether that's learning courses from the Product Marketing Alliance, WTF is go to market, Pragmatic. There's great training out there right now for product marketers. It's only growing. And I would say because the space is still growing, they're still relatively cost effective. If you're going in and trying to do product management masters, it's going to cost you in Ireland anywhere from 10 to 15K. You can get a hell of a lot of certifications and learning in a virtual manner for €1,000 to €2,000, $1,000 to $2,000 in that space. So, definitely learning and development is something that product marketers should always be have always at the top of their mind.
All roads lead to revenue, right? So this is that makes perfect sense to me. But then you started to give some wonderful kind of leading measures or things that they could lean into that will impact the revenue, right? Some people say, I've heard some people say that revenue takes care of itself if you do the things that will impact the revenue, right? And so if you want to impact that rev, what are some things? And you mentioned our friends at HighSpot, which we love our friends at HighSpot, right? HighSpot's a technology that can be employed for product marketers, and every product marketer should use. I want to go deeper here into technology. For today's product marketer, what tools or maybe technologies should they be using in addition to HighSpot, right? So what else should they be using and why?
This is an area that's really close to my heart, Ryan, and I know it's not a planted question, but I started a podcast called Product Marketing AI about a year ago, and it was really to delve into that area because I felt there was, there was such a mass amount of tooling for product management folks, for people in the demand generation space, people in the campaign space, marketing operations, just the MarTech stacks that you would see on Scott Brinker's files, so much stuff there, and there was very little, I think, focused directly on product marketers. There was, I think, probably some elements that were maybe linked in a kind of an opaque way, but I think that was an area that I really wanted to hone in on. So when I talked to people on the podcast, it was very much around getting their three favorite tools and the one they hated most. So some of the things I think that have really come out very strongly is project management tooling is crucial. I would say the use of a project management tooling is crucial. From what I've seen, and this is probably a challenge for everybody in the project management space, is a lot of them are doing pretty much the same thing. So whether it's ClickUp or Rike or Asana, they all do a good job.
Monday.
So
I got to give my shout out for Monday. Love me some Monday.
Monday.com.
Yeah.
I've used that in the past, loved it. But
Yeah.
as I say, if somebody said to me, we're kicking out Monday and we're taking in Rike, or we're kicking out Rike and we're taking in ClickUp, I'm probably going to be okay with any of those tools. And I think everybody in the product marketing space is pretty much native to those. So I would say definitely on the project management side, for me, I think a partner in the win-loss space is really, really important for those interviews. That's not necessarily a technology in all cases, but the ability to be able to outsource that type of work is really, really important. One of the things, I was talking to Maureen West, she's an amazing product marketing leader out of the Midwest in the US, and one of the things she said was product marketers should not be doing their own win-loss interviews, period.
Why?
And
Why did she say that?
because it's so time consuming. So, and I think, and it's a huge part of it is it's the program management behind it as well. So you really have to hone in on who your candidates are, the scope of the interviews, the creation of the reports. In a lot of cases, people who take this on are in maybe 1 to 2 person product marketing teams, and it can be a full-time job in itself unless you have some help. So I would say that's an area that's kind of ripe for outsourcing, ripe for technology advancement. Competitive intel, I think, is an area I've kind of dipped in and out of in terms of technology. I think the basis of where you actually want to put that in your stack is, I think, based on the maturity of the organization. I think in a lot of cases you can have, if you keep your competitive set as narrow as you can, 2 or 3 competitors for each product, you can get really good battle cards into the hands of your sales team, host them on your sales enablement platform, host them on SharePoint as you need it, as needed. So I think there's kind of different ways to cut this depending on your budget. But then I would say one of the things that kind of came up quite a lot in talking to folks was picking up the phone is an underrated and very, very cheap tool when it comes to async work these days, because I think there's always that temptation to, you chuck a Google Doc or you send a kind of a Word doc out to everybody and let's all work on it async. And, after a week, everybody's been kind of pinging in and out. There's comments everywhere and it's a total mess. So I think that the importance of actually picking up the phone and having conversations with folks, particularly in a remote world, is so important when you're not actually meeting people on a day-to-day basis. So don't be afraid to go analog, was what I would say on some of these things. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone.
Love that. Yeah.
And because it's too easy. It's like the Precious. It's like the Shining. Frodo or Lord of the Rings, this guy looking for the tool that's going to solve all the problems. Yes, yes, the tools do a really good job, but it's not always necessarily the be on and end all of what you're actually going to help to create. Because when you take a tool in, there's budget that needs to be signed off, there's relationships with those vendors that you actually need to build up, there's people you need to manage the content that sits on those. So I would say that those are things. So comp intel, use your project management tools as well as you can, your sales enablement platforms, ideally with some analytics included. It can be pretty disheartening to see a presentation that you worked on or a new pitch deck and it's been downloaded 7 times. And sometimes you kind of need that information to give that push to the sales and sales enablement team to kind of really distribute this stuff internally. So I think those are the things that I'd like to have in my toolkit as a product marketer.
So, first of all, I can see Gollum sitting in the corner right now with his precious. Oh, my precious. That's funny. It was a great visual you provided us and the listeners today. So that was fantastic. You mentioned a myriad of different technologies and areas, from win-loss to conversational or competitive, CI, conversational intelligence, customer experience, NPS. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. You just bumped into a problem that everybody is experiencing, not just product marketers, but sales, executives, product, everybody in technology today is experiencing tech stack issues. And I want to, and yes, this is totally selfish on my part because we are a win-loss company, but it helps prove the point. You mentioned your friend in the Midwest, the United States, who, look, you shouldn't be doing your own win-loss. I asked why, and I think you said because of just the time commitment. It's a big lift from all of the project management that goes behind the scenes, just to forget about the phone call, but everything that leads up to the phone call. It's a lift. And if anybody has tried it, it's a lot. It's time consuming. That could be a full-time job. We've tried to remove some of that lift via automation, right? So we have a whole process that's really diminished the lift on the back end from a project management perspective, that allows people to then focus on the thing that they want from all of these technologies. And that is the insights that they provide you. It's not about the tool. It's about the insight, right? What you just said, a product marketer needs to know how many times it's been downloaded so they know where they can go push. They want the insight. They don't want the tool. And now I don't want to say they don't want the tool, but it's not, the tool isn't the end. That's the means. The end is the insight, so they know how to inform their decisions and their behaviors. How do you do this in a product marketing world where there is so much data? How do we start to make sense of the data that's coming from all of these different areas, combine it into an insight that causes you to act? How do you synthesize all this stuff?
I think that's where the opportunity sits for vendors that can consolidate a lot of this tooling. Because when I think of how nascent and immature the product marketing tool set world actually is,
oh my gosh,
it's frightening how I think, product marketer as a function is we're in that probably angsty kind of teenage phase as we kind of grow up.
I never had that angsty teenage phase. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, I certainly had. And I think when it comes from a technology point of view, that's where I kind of felt the opportunity was last year, is that there's not as many tools dedicated to the product marketer. And I think, frankly, it's because in a lot of cases, product marketers don't have budget. And I think that's changing as the influence of the team and actually grows. The tooling is going to come because the budget is going to be there. And I think what people are actually going to try and find is something that's going to be able to combine a lot of those elements. I think Ignition and Derek and Osgood and those folks are doing a really good job in trying to define a new category of all-in-one platform for the product marketer. But I think that's an area that is going to be so important. The positioning of it is always tricky, right? Because it's like, how far do you get into the Jira engineering, product development type world, and how much further do you actually go down and actually use the launch aspects of it? So I think there's so much white space there for tooling that consolidates a lot of this stuff, because I think a lot of the times the project management tools certainly pitched into product marketers really, really useful, but they're not necessarily designed and built for the product marketing function.
Okay. So we've talked about the technology, we've talked about the past, kind of where things are headed. Let's go further into the future, right? So 5 to 10 years from now, how do you predict product marketing will evolve, right? What's that next iteration potentially look like for that product marketing function?
About 2 years ago, I did a very poorly attended presentation on YouTube that I think has been subsequently viewed about 114 times.
It's going to have 115 after this.
Yeah,
podcast.
It wasn't exactly a viral hit, but I think my kind of Jerry Maguire prediction at the time was that bifurcation was the real theme. Although I think it's starting to kind of come to pass. I think what you're going to see in the role is almost the demise of product marketing, and that it almost needs to fall apart for it to come back together. Because I think product marketers, almost to a person, take on too much.
Mm.
Competitive intel, sales enablement, positioning and messaging, sales support, pricing, launch elements, GTM, throw it all into the mix, campaign briefings. It's too much for one role. And I think you're going to see a lot more specialisms in that space in product marketing as a whole. I think you're starting to see it right now, particularly with competitive intelligence specialists. Sales enablement has been an area that's obviously been there for quite a while, but I think product marketing and sales enablement that focuses on the content that gets created is going to be another area. People that are positioning and messaging specialists is going to be another area that's going to have to split. But I think the skills that a product marketer are going to be able to have, even though they're focused in on a key area, they're still going to be able to bring that together. So I do see the kind of bifurcation of the role into dedicated areas and more achievable chunks. And I think areas that people can actually have more of an impact in. So you can actually show more impact rather than keeping 8, 10, 15 projects kind of ticking along in terms of the hours of the day that you actually have. If you can actually get your hands around something like a comp intel work stream or sales enablement or refactoring or reframing the positioning, messaging, strategic narrative in a business, that's going to give you a lot more impact and I think a lot more job satisfaction as well for a lot of product marketers. So I do think I do see that kind of that bifurcation, a split of the role into more dedicated and focused areas, and perhaps that kind of leadership area then to be able to try and bring that all together and work more closely with people in the campaign side and people in the web side of the house too.
So love that prediction. You heard it here, folks. Bifurcation, specialization of the product marketing function. So I think I can see that as you've even started to talk. I can see how that is already evolving in other other organizations that we serve. So it's really interesting. So does that mean? Are you saying that the product marketer generalist will go away, or is it going to be a specialization, but you need to have a foundation in the generalist kind of space?
No, I think people can go from one to the other. Where I would see you'd have someone in the leadership space are going to need to have a purview over all of it, but that they're the person is going to be able to kind of bring that together. But I think if you're coming in with a comp intel specialist background, you're going to have a real mindset of what's important in the market, what's important to the customer, how that helps sales. You're going to easily be able to transition into a sales enablement type role. If you're in the sales enablement side, you're going to be easily able to transition into roles that are more in terms of pricing, commercial background. So I think there'll still be plenty of overlaps, but I think you're going to see a lot more job specs that are product marketing GTM specific, which was a role that I started in Sitecore initially and then moved into product marketing as a whole. But I think those type of roles, product marketing comp intel, product marketing win-loss, product marketing sales enablement, those are some of the roles you're going to see more and more in the future.
So what about, does this lend itself to speed? Does this specialization lend itself to just-in-time solutions? What I mean is, in today's buying or selling environment or buying environment, depending on what side of the coin you're sitting on, if you're the buyer or the seller, most of this is happening with the digital transformation and buyers spending more and more time self-educating prior to engaging with a salesperson. They are then coming with prefabricated ideas, right? Some ideas and hypotheses around who you are as a company, what your product does, and so on and so forth, and what they even need, right? The solution to the problem that they're looking for. How does the product marketer evolution that you're talking about support this kind of just-in-time mentality, where a salesperson, a marketing messaging, something needs to be customized, or whatever it is? How does that fit into that need for just-in-time?
I think that specialism almost by definition allows them to achieve what they need to achieve. And I think right now when a request comes in, it goes into a pile and you have to try and triage that as best you can. And you try and do as much as you possibly can in a short space of time. What I think is, but I think the way those tasks and roles are actually building up, it's completely unsustainable, the amount of workload that's been foisted on most of these people. I know that there's been quite a bit of talk about burnout and stuff in product marketing. I think that's going to become more relevant, more prevalent as well in the industry. So I think in order for people to continue to be successful in their roles, they're going to have to take on an achievable amount of work. And I think when you're focused in on a specific arm or area of product marketing as a whole, you're going to be able to do those things faster and meet those requirements faster, I think. So that's how I would see it playing out.
So Sean, winding our conversation down here, my favorite part about our conversation, about your perspective, the paradigm that you shared with us and our listeners today, has been the human-centric nature of your paradigm. Meaning, you've talked about people, you've talked about relationships, you've talked about burnout, you're talking about human beings. There isn't enough of that. Frankly, there is not enough of that kind of conversation that's happening in today's environment. So thank you for sharing that perspective and that paradigm. That's refreshing. Thank you.
No, I appreciate it, because I think, in an environment where you're seeing layoffs, it is difficult, and you have to kind of reframe what's achievable in a role as well. I think even in a kind of a post-layoff world, everybody's trying to show the value. Everybody's trying to do as much as they possibly can. That's your natural inclination when something like that happens, but that's only sustainable for so long. And I think that's what people need to have in the back of their mind. I think it's, as people come out of, ideally, this kind of phase of layoffs in the industry are starting to come to a close. That's what you'd like to think. But I think, in the industry as a whole, people taking on achievable chunks of work, I think is definitely something that I certainly haven't perfected, but as someone who tries to, like I say, bite off more than I can chew, but it's definitely something that people need to keep in mind.
Okay, Sean, last question for you. If you had one piece of advice for today's product marketer, either just starting or somebody who's looking to take it to the next level, what would it be?
I have a motto that I use, and it's super cheesy, but I'm just going to drop it anyway because it's what I live by. And I think there's three elements that I prioritize in my own life. It's in this order: it's health, family, and work. And I think when you look after the first two, the third one becomes a lot easier. And I think in a lot of areas in product marketing as a whole, because the role is so pressurized and there's so much to get done, it's very easy to flip that. It's very easy for it to be work, family, and then health. And I always come back to that analogy of when you're sitting on the airplane, you got to look after your own air mask, your own oxygen mask first, before you look after somebody else's. So you need to be able to look after your health, to be able to look after your family. In order to be able to look after your family, you have to be able to work. So I think if people can nail those two, then the work bit gets easier. The learning tools are there, their supports are there, the opportunities are there in the industry for product marketers. It's a super important part of any software business, or even any hardware business for that matter. So I think if you can kind of nail those two elements, focus on your health, focus on your family, and then the work comes third, in that order. May not be something that most people would think about, but it's how I think about how I like to do my job. And I think that gives you the most mental clarity. It gives you the most energy to do your job and to really kind of prioritize what needs to be prioritized. So health, family, work, in that order, and then just keep learning. That's it for me.
Sean, man, you've been amazing. Thank you for the time today. And thank you for coming on the show.
I really appreciate it, Ryan. Really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much.
And listeners, for more from our friends at Sitecore and from us here at Primary Intelligence, check out the show notes at www.primary-intel.com/podcast. And remember, no deal is out of reach. We'll see you next time.